Hi, this is Jennifer from Positively Learning. I'm so glad that you're joining me here today. This video kicks off a brand new series all about classroom routines, systems, and organization. So, if you are a special educator watching this in real time, it's the beginning of June, and you may have just celebrated your last day of school, or maybe you have a couple of weeks left in the school year. However, you may also be watching this at another time. Maybe it's September or December. These tips will still be very helpful any time of year, especially if your routines could use a little improvement. So, as we go through this series, we're going to be moving from a very macro level towards very specific. So, we're going to be starting off with classroom spaces and setup and systems. And then we'll be moving more micro with all the paperwork organization and all of those tasks that special educators have to do. And then we'll be finishing up with the nitty gritty, especially diving into data collection. All right, so as we start thinking about classroom routines, I like to use these four S's as our filters. So maybe we're deciding between one routine versus another. We can run it through these, what I refer to as the four S's, to make that decision. I think of it as this huge snowball. We're at the top of the hill, it's huge, it's large. But as it starts moving down the hill, it starts to pick up speed and it gets faster and faster. The same thing will happen with these routines. We use these filters, it's going to start making decision making easier and faster, and things will start to fall into place. Now, one really important note when you look at these filters, these four S's, you may be thinking, this is common sense. Of course, I'm already doing this. And I would absolutely agree. Please know that I already know that you are already thinking about safety and student centered. I know that. But as an instructional coach who often got a peek into special education classrooms, I would see such amazing systems in place, but they weren't running the way we expected. And when we dug a little deeper, we found that maybe two or three of these filters were awesome. They were running, but maybe it was just one that was a little wobbly or needed a little bit of tweaking. And this is really good news because it's a lot easier to fix that little one than to start all over from scratch. So I want to go through these four S's very quickly. We're going to be starting off with, of course, safety. Again, I know you know all this, but as a special educator, you're leading this classroom. You may even be facilitating a team of support staff. So this would be great information to share with them as well. So we think about safety, of course, we're thinking about physical and we're thinking about social emotional. So the physical, you can make the best plans with seating charts and arrangements and carpet spots, but really the best way to make sure your room is set up is to walk it, which I know may not always be possible in the summer, but when you get a chance to get into the room, you want to walk that and look at those traffic flows and the accessibility. Accessibility to the exits, to another place in the classroom, accessibility to the learning that's going on in the classroom from every seating arrangement. We also know that we'll be working with students with IEPs that include evacuation plans. And you'll know them and I'll know them, but we need to make sure the room is also set up for that. Now, I did put in supplies, child-proofing the room. And of course, no one's going to leave out like a sharp paper cutter or scissors. However, we also know that special educators often don't get equipped with classrooms that are designed for young children. We may have shared space, we may be using an office. One year, I even taught in a cafeteria. So, thinking about that physical space, are there things that need to be moved in, things that need to be moved out to make sure it's set up for safety? We also want to think about that mental safety. Does every student enter your classroom and interact, feel like they have a sense of belonging? It's Maslow, right? And of course, we always create that welcoming environment, but there still could be some hidden bias, and that might not even be something that we're doing. It could be in the curriculum, the content, visuals, behavior systems. Those are all things we can take a look at to make sure every child feels like, oh, this is meant for me. One quick example that isn't so obvious, but I would see it over and over again, was as we were getting ready for summer. People might be reading books, and those books would talk about like mowing the grass in the backyard, jumping in the pool, going on a vacation or a road trip. And I would never use those types of resources because I knew where I was teaching in a city, my students didn't have backyards. No one owned a lawnmower. They didn't go on these vacations. So if I was using that type of resource without providing any kind of context, I could imagine a student sitting in my classroom thinking, she has no idea. She doesn't really know me. And that is not something I want a student to feel. All right, so moving on to the next S, this kind of goes with what we just talked about with safety, having that sense of belonging, feeling like you're in a place where you could take a risk and not have any fear. One great way to do this is, of course, creating a student centered classroom, offering student choice whenever possible, posting student work with permission, by the way, posting student artwork with permission. One of the other neat things that you could do at the beginning of a school year is have student generated classroom visuals. So students could create the number line. We could all do it collaboratively. They could be creating pictures for the sound wall or for the alphabet line, those types of things that could have students involved from the very beginning. Okay, the next S is sustainability. Now, I will say, as the instructional coach on the outside looking in, this was the one that was the toughest. It was the toughest to see. And it's because I think that, as special educators, we're always doing the very, very best that we can. But are the decisions that we're making something that is going to be sustainable from the very beginning of school year to the very end with our students in mind? I had an educator that was just, oh, she was amazing. Her sense of classroom management style was impeccable, and her students thrived with it. This is an inclusion classroom. However, when those students left that classroom, or if that teacher wasn't there that day, it was very difficult to sustain. And that's not really good for our students. We don't want something very complicated, even though the complicated part was so fun. They were earning prizes and doing different things, and it was just neat. It was great to watch, but it was not necessarily sustainable. It has to be sustainable to support your students in a consistent manner, but it also has to be sustainable for you to support you all school year as well. So, this is often the place where it's a little tricky to make those decisions because you want to do more, but we also have to make sure we can keep up with it. Okay, and the last S. So far we've had safety, student centered, sustainable, and now simplicity. Less is more or less. You can always add more later. Let's use the example of flexible seating. Say that you're watching this and it's July. You've had a little bit of space from the school year and you've been maybe chatting with another teacher, maybe social media. You're seeing some really awesome flexible seating, and you know your students on your caseload would love that. That's a tricky one because you want to give them everything that they need. Maybe you have donors choose or a grant and you have the ability to do that. However, walking in the first week of school, is it in the student's best interest to see 10 different seating arrangements or options? Or is it better to have it a little more simpler, less choice? They can get used to it. You can always add more in later. And maybe you don't agree with me, but that is something I've seen work really, really well when we can make it much simpler. All right, so it's a tough one. So we do want to do all of those things, especially after we've had a little bit of break and a chance to reflect. So here are the four S's. These filters make decision making much, much easier. Of course, I know you have these in place. Safety, of course. Student centered, of course. But really keep in mind that sustainability, not just for students, but for you too, and that simplicity so that students can be very successful from the beginning. They don't need to sit and listen to many, many different ways to use something or not use something. They can just do one or two, get real good at it. You can always add more. All right, so thank you so much for listening to this first video in the series. We're going to continue talking about spaces and systems. You're going to hear those four S's again. So be sure to ask any questions if you have them. And I can't wait to see you for the next video. Hit subscribe so you know exactly when it comes out, and I will talk with you soon.